Hallelujah, men. Do I have any grateful men? You came into the house to make a joyful noise unto the Lord because you recognize His hand is upon your life. If you recognize God's hand is upon your life, just give God a shout in your own way. Just give Him a praise in your own way. I'm telling you right now, you wouldn't be here if the sovereign God did not have His hand on your life for good. I hear Him saying, like He said in Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans that I have for you. They are good and not evil, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a future and a hope. You're called by my name. I hear Him saying, like Jesus spoke to His disciples, you didn't choose me, but I chose you, and I ordained you that you might go forth and bring forth fruit, and your fruit shall remain. You are called to be fruitful and to multiply, to take authority, to take dominion, to subdue the earth, to bring it under subjection. That is your purpose. That is your calling. That is your destiny. That is who you are. I command you right now to be fruitful and to multiply, to fill the earth and to subdue it. One more time. Give God a roar if you know that's who you are. That's who you are. That's who you are. As the worshipers were leading us in worship, there was something that really stood out to me, and they were singing a new song unto the Lord, and so there was a prophetic flow. And they could have stayed at this one point the whole time, but I love the way that they moved. And they said, this is holy ground. And the moment that they said it, they probably repeated it 30 times or so. And they kept saying, this is holy ground. And there was an inference as it relates to worship where they were speaking of their temple, that we are holy ground. And that is all very much true, particularly in the context of worship, as we're opening our spirits up to the Lord and allowing God to fill us with Himself. And the instruction to empty ourselves, because nothing good will happen by our own might or by our own power or by our own strength. But everything good and meaningful will happen by the Spirit of the Lord. So I got that. In fact, the context of that particular passage of Scripture was when Nehemiah was rebuilding the temple. And there was a promise in there, I'll tie it all in together. There was a promise in there where God said that before Zerubbabel, it went like this: who are you, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, right? And you can just put your name in there because Zerubbabel is kind of off the chain. You ain't never heard nobody named Zerubbabel, but that would not be a bad name. But anyway, I digress. Who are you, great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, before Touré, before Don, before Pastor Robinson, before David, before Michael, before Nicholas, before Noah, you're going to become a plain. And He will bring forth the capstone, that's the top, the finishing detail of the building. He will bring forth the capstones with shouts of grace, grace. It's not going to happen because I'm so strong. It's not going to happen because I've got all this power. It's going to happen by the grace of God. And the grace of God is released by the Spirit of God. And the Spirit of God is received when I humble myself and I open myself up and I worship God. And so we are very much the temple. When we're talking about this is holy ground, yes, we're talking about our temple, but I heard something about this space that we're in right now, about this moment that we are in right now. This is holy ground. You remember Moses, when Moses full of potential, Moses full of passion, Moses with a call in his life, not quite knowing what the call was, but Moses as a wanderer on the backside of the desert, as a seeker, didn't have it all figured out, but knew that something was on his life. He had a history with God, and he knew a little bit about himself, almost killed from birth, and ended up, you know the story, murdering someone and or killing someone, I should say. I don't think it was murder. It was killing someone and then running and all that kind of stuff. And he's trying to figure himself out. And the Lord approaches him and speaks to him through a burning bush. And one of the first things that God says to him is, take off your shoes, for the place that you are standing in is holy ground. In other words, I don't know where you've been. I don't know where those shoes have carried you. And I don't know what you got on your shoes in the midst of your journey without a clear revelation of me and a clear revelation of your calling and your assignment. I don't know where your shoes have been. I don't know what you've tracked in. But I'm telling you right now, your life is getting ready to change. And I need you to take off your shoes, because I'm doing something with your feet. I'm about to order your steps. And I need you to take off your shoes, because you've been walking in your own strength and you've been walking in your own understanding. But right now you're getting ready to walk on holy ground. Right now you're getting ready to walk into something new. You're getting ready to walk into something that is not by your own strength, but it's by me. And I felt very much as they shifted into that. This is holy ground. I felt like I needed to, just in case you didn't sense that this is something special, that this is something unique, that this is something divine. This is not just a gathering of men where we beat our chests and talk about how masculine and how strong we are. Being a mighty man is much deeper than that. And I suspect we may even get into that a little later on today. No, this is holy ground. I don't do stuff just to do stuff. I don't call meetings together just to call meetings together because I need to fill up a calendar. I am busy as all outdoors. But I aim to listen. And then when he says do it, I aim, okay, so we're going to do it. Now, what are we going to do and what's going to happen? And God's been speaking to me about men. More than we can share today, but I'm excited about what we will accomplish today. But I'm telling you, God's doing something powerful with you. And I'm excited about it. And so today, I've got some guests, some really, let me tell you why I didn't just come in here and get a bunch of quote unquote preachers to just preach you up. It's because one of the things that I'm learning is that we oftentimes have what I like to call personal constraints. And they're things that we have to work out, understand, sort through, and get tools for. Watch this. Not healing for healing's sake, but healing so that we are no longer distracted or restricted in how far we can go in God. Let me tell you something real quick. So if you follow me on social media at all, you know I love to work out, and I be doing all kind of stuff. You probably saw something the other day. I was twisting around and flipping and pushing stuff up and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to be honest with you. I am not doing it to look good. That's in there a little bit, but it's not what you think. I'm going to be honest with you, be very transparent with you. There have been moments where I have been on that stage and I had more word than wind. Where I literally, Pastor Robinson, had to, watch this, suppress word because I was out of breath. So there is a correlation between your ability to give God all that God has given you and your personal constraints, whether it be health, whether it be mental, whether it be otherwise. So I'm realizing now that we as men need tools for our calling. I don't want to be mentally well for the sake of being mentally well. There's a call on my life. I don't want to be physically well for the sake of being physically well. I want to be able to give God everything I got when I preach. I want to be able to give God every year that I have the potential to give him, and not fall into this notion and this idea that if I am anointed, that is enough. No, because I am anointed, I aim to be more in the areas where the anointing will not fix. And we have a speaker that's going to touch on that much more eloquently than I can. But brothers, I'm excited, man. We're going to have an awesome time today. What today will look like is in just a moment, I'm going to invite our first speaker up. We're going to have a conversation that will be extremely powerful. And then after that conversation, we're going to have what we call these sharpening sessions. And that's where we will go to our tables and we will discuss amongst ourselves what we heard. There may be some prompts that come forward, things that get us to thinking and speaking. And so we're going to have sharpening around the table, and it's going to be amazing. I encourage you to open up to your brother to the best of your ability. God's going to speak. God's going to unearth some things, and we're going to talk through it. And then after that, I'm going to introduce our next guest, and he's going to come up and share some profound things with us that will be a great blessing to us. And then after that, we're going to have another sharpening session. It'll be slightly shorter, but it will still be an adequate amount of time for us to talk and for us to build together, get to know each other, because we're all on the battlefield together. And we need each other. Look, just turn around, just look at you. These are your comrades in battle. These are your comrades. A true warrior is not just fighting for the cause of the war in which they have been enlisted, but they're also fighting for their brother. I am my brother's keeper. No matter if your brother looks like you, whether not your brother is the same ethnicity as you, we are all brothers in here. Hey, come on, somebody. Red, white, black, green, purple, however you showed up, we are all brothers. And so we'll have another sharpening sessions. And then I'm going to bring both of our guests back up on the stage, and we're going to have a time of Q&A, after which we will close out in prayer. So we're going to have an awesome, awesome, awesome time today, and it's going to be a real blessing. And God, so we thank you for all the prayers that have gone forth. We thank you so much for Pastor Dobbins. And as we shift into this time, be with us. Speak to us. It's already been prayed. We agree with that powerful prayer that was prayed in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. You may be seated. Please greet somebody as you take your seat. I am extremely excited about the conversation that we're getting ready to have. And one of the reasons why I'm excited about the conversation, in addition to it being a very meaningful conversation, is I'm excited about who I get to have this conversation with. If you were here at As a Man Thinketh just recently, in fact, if you were here at As a Man Thinketh, holler at me real quick. It was such a blessing, and I don't think that we can acknowledge As a Man Thinketh without acknowledging the visionary, not only of As a Man Thinketh, but of our movement, the Potter's House. Can we just take a moment and give a roar for our own Bishop T.D. Jakes? Come on, somebody. 5 decades of serving men and women tirelessly and modeling something extremely powerful for us. And so we honor our bishop. We're so grateful for our bishop. I'm sure, knowing him, because he watches everything, he's watching us right now, praying for us, interceding for us, and desiring that we would be all that God has called us to be. And so I want to honor him. But As a Man Thinketh, As a Man Thinketh, there was a powerful panel. And one of the men who really, everybody stood out, but he certainly stood out on this panel, and it's Dr. Oshan Darius Gadsden. And I want to tell you a little bit about him really quickly. After receiving his master's degree in clinical psychology from Teachers College at Columbia University and earning his PhD from Howard, he amassed over 25 years of experience as an applied psychologist, scholar, and educator. Currently serving as chair, he's revolutionized the Department of Psychology at Hampton University. In addition, his extensive clinical work and expertise have led him to be published over 28 times. That's a big, big deal. They don't publish you if they don't respect you deeply. Over 28 times, and it keeps him booked. I mean, he travels all around the world speaking and teaching, not the least of which is with the tour Just Heal Bro, which is the nationwide tour with our very own Jay Barnett. In fact, Jay Barnett is the one I said, listen, I really need, do you have somebody in your network that really can help us in the area of stress and understanding stressors and identifying stress? He's like, oh, I've got the perfect guy. And I had a subsequent conversation with him and felt all the more encouraged that he would add great value to our time together and to really bless us. So do me a favor. Let's honor and celebrate our incredible guest, Dr. Ocean Darius Gadsden, as he joins me on the stage. Dr. Gadsden, first of all, thank you for agreeing to be here. You had to travel across the country to be here with us, but when we talked and we shared, and I told you what we were talking about, you were excited. It was like your spirit had quickened. I almost felt like you felt the urgency of the hour, the urgency of the conversation. What was that I was sensing when I invited you to help me empower the men with stress tools? What was it that got your attention and made you have to be here?
First of all, thank you for inviting me, and I'm so happy to be here with you, brothers. I was excited because, thank you. I was excited because of the seriousness that you came to this with, and having a space for Black men to not just hear ideas, but to begin to process more deeply who they are, who they're not, and how they can get to be who they envision themselves to be. And often we have spaces for women, often we have mediocre spaces for men, where we just put something together. But I was impressed that you are creating and have created a space for us not just to hear, but for us to then process, to make sense of what we're hearing based on our own subjectivity. You and I are very similar because we're Black men, but our subjectivity and where we come from and our experiences are different. And so the slingshot and the pebble that you need to defeat the enemy may not look like the slingshot and pebble that I need. So we have to have a space to discover what each of us are in need for. And I'm so happy to be a part of this.
No, that's tremendous. I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you share with us statistics that we might find alarming as it relates to stress and stress in men, certainly Black men, not simply Black men, but just are there any statistics that are alarming that would really get our attention about stress and its effects on us?
Yeah, there are. And I wrote a couple of them down because I really appreciate this space for us to just really coast through it. And I want you to hear some of these stats. Some of these stats you may understand because you may personally be a part of them. But I wanted you to hear these stats, number one, for us to normalize that all of us have something that we have gone through, we're currently going through, or that we currently will go through. And I want to normalize that because oftentimes we hear about Black men as deficient, problematic, et cetera, but I want it to be clear that there are many of us that are suffering with things that we don't talk about, but we are suffering. And so there's a context to this. 93% of African American men report being stressed. 60% of men report that their biggest stressor are money issues. 43.2% of men report that their stress comes from racism. Men that are 18 to 44 have feelings of anxiety and depression that they never talk about. Suicide is the third leading cause for death for African American men 15 to 24. I need to say that again. Suicide, not the ideation, not just the thought, but the following through of it, is the third leading cause for death for African American men 15 to 24. African American men 20 to 24 are the highest or have the highest suicide rate among other African American men, and even more than women. 1 in 10 men in this building today suffer from anxiety and depression. And 40% of men don't ever talk to anybody about the stressors that they are sitting with and trying to navigate life through.
Wow. Those are alarming statistics. And one of them was when you said 93% of men report stress. Those are the ones that report, which means that we're at 100%, really. Because you have to factor in, I'm assuming as it relates to statistics, you have to factor, if these are the ones that reported it, and it's difficult for us to talk about it, then it is almost logical to say that 100% of us are stressed in some way. Let's talk about stress. One of the things that pulled, that really got my attention when we had our conversation the other day was you had a very interesting perspective about stress. And if I'm recalling correctly, you thought that oftentimes we are focused on the symptom as if the symptom were the cause. You had a very, very eloquent approach and a perspective to that. Can you talk about what stress really is to you?
I think that oftentimes when we talk about stress, we talk about it from a non-nuanced perspective. And what I mean by that is I don't see stress as the problem. I see stress as a symptom to more underlying issues. And so when I think about stress, I categorize stress as what we might call, there are 3 types of stress that most clinicians refer to. We call that acute stress. And that stress is contextual. It could be positive or negative. It is based on some surprising event, like when you're on a roller coaster and you're going up. That's a form of acute stress, positive. And then there is episodic acute stress. And that is the stress where you are finding yourself more stressed than you're not. You can be in that stress zone for weeks, months, or years. And usually some examples of that are marriages, where the marriage is not going well, but you're still in the marriage, but it's causing stress. And then there is what we call chronic stress. And this is a stress that is worse than episodic acute stress because it becomes a part of your identity. But I think what's important for us to understand, and I think we're going to get the tools today in our breakout sessions for us to begin to decipher whether the stress that you are encountering in your life is contextual stress or stress that's related to unresolved trauma. There's a difference. Many of us don't know the difference. And if you don't know the difference, you don't know what tools that you may need to overcome these symptoms that you're facing. So, for example, there are many of us who have been socialized as black boys and black men to not see themselves as fully human, to have issues related to their sense of worth. Now watch this. If you are in a situation, whether it's work or marriage, and you are coming to the dynamic already feeling unworthy, you're going to feel stressed about your capacity to navigate and manage the experience and the situation. And so what I'm attempting to say is that it's important for us to begin to differentiate between those normal stressors, transitions of life, and those things and emotions that are coming up as a consequence of undealt with trauma and undealt with emotional dysregulation.
Wow. We're going to dig into that and unpack that some more. I want to, before we do, because we're going to launch into that, and I think that's going to lead us into our breakout sharpening session. I went through, so I lost a good friend. I've lost several good friends from childhood, and most recently, this was in 2020, I lost a good friend, and I looked up one day, and I knew it really bothered me. But I looked up, and literally there was a patch out of my hair. And this undetected stress, when you start talking about stress that's related to trauma, I didn't know in that context and in many other contexts that I was stressed at all until the symptoms shown up. And one could argue, in my estimation, erroneously, that I have a high threshold for stress because of how I grew up, the things that I've experienced, the things that I've seen, the things that I've survived. And somehow, even though I am functioning, I'm being torn down a bit. Can you talk about the reality there? And because there might be some men in here that feel like, yeah, they get a little stressed every once in a while, but they are not really, because I'm managing it, I'm surviving, I might even be successful. Can you talk about undetected stress before we go further?
Well, that's very powerful. And I think that when Dr. Amos he comes up, he's going to talk about that somatic piece of stress. And we call it psychosomatic, where the body and the mind, of course, are very connected. And you can't hide from what your mind is troubled by. And so it will show up in your body. And this idea, I was thinking about this in meditation today about David. And the scripture, I believe it's Psalm 55, correct me, theologians, if I'm wrong, where he says, let's get the verse. I want to get it. If I were a dove, I would fly away and be at rest, right? And I was thinking about that because here is a leader, right? Here is God's man, anointed, contextually just betrayed by his friend, enemies surmounting him. But here is David saying, if I had wings like a dove, I would be at peace and I would fly away. Some clinicians and maybe even theologians could look at that as a suicidal ideation. Wow. That here you have this man who is so exhausted, so prolonged, so feeling invalid, that he wanted to give up, that he couldn't see any solution, that he was ready to give up so much and make a permanent decision based on a temporal solution, a temporal situation. And I bring that up because, and there's this book I read many years ago, and if you're a leader, you should get it. It's by a Bishop Gerald something, he's a psychologist, and the book is titled Preachers Are People Too. And what he's talking about is that people that are gifted can often hide because they hide behind their gift. But the gift, as you mentioned earlier, is not for you, it's for others. And so you can have people who are gifted but are not moral. You can have people who are gifted but are still in compulsivity because they use their gifts, their calling, their expertise as a way to hide. And so I want to invite us to dismiss this idea that all you need is success, because the body takes score and the mind takes score, and sooner or later those things catch up to us. You can't run from trauma. You can't run from unresolved emotionality, because sooner or later it will knock on your door. Your marriage, your health, your decision making, the way that you perceive reality, it will knock on your door and it will ask for its payment.
Wow. You said it a little bit, but I want to really drive this home. What do you say to men that say, I'm a little stressed, but I got it. It's not that big of a deal.
Yes. And so when I think about that statement, and I hear that statement a lot in therapy with patients, and I think about it in my own life, and I think about the way that we have been socialized as men to take on all of the stressors, because it's a rite of passage to determine whether or not you're a real man or not. And so one of the things that I talk about is that we have to begin to rebuke, now watch this, the spirit of John Henryism. what do I mean by that? John Henryism is a sort of coping mechanism that we as men have been socialized, internalized, that we will postpone our own health, postpone our own needs to meet the needs of others, and never being fulfilled or poured into at all. And so one of the things that I think is important for us, and we talk about tools, and I'm sure we'll talk about tools all day, is the thing that comes to me about that is learning to set self-boundaries. Learning to ask yourself, is this what I need to be doing right now? Do I have the capacity to navigate this? Am I doing this out of love, or am I doing this out of a need or something that I think I have to do? Because look at this. If you're doing something because you think you should be doing it, your offering is tainted. And so we as black men have to begin, and men at all, have to begin to set self-boundaries and ask ourselves, is this what is needful for me now? Now watch this. The second thing we need to do is learn to set boundaries with other people. And create a space that is consistent where we check in with ourselves, because yes, we can function. But is that what we want to be? We want a mediocre function? We want to just function through life in mediocrity? Or do we want to, as you talked about earlier, expand and be the greatest version of ourselves? So yes, we can function, but why would you destroy yourself like that? And why would you dishonor yourself by just giving something to survive? We want to go to the level of thriving.
Oh, this is so good. You getting this, guys? This is powerful. You said a lot there. You talked about boundaries, and you talked about, first of all, we're talking about changing a whole way of thinking and being. Because you're right, we're all taught to believe that the more we can carry on our shoulders, the stronger the man we are. Let's talk about boundaries. You mentioned two types of boundaries. You mentioned the self-boundary, where you create space to check in with yourself, and you said boundaries with others. I want to dig into that self-boundary where what are some of the disciplines that we can employ? Because a lot of times we don't really know how to check on ourselves. What does checking on ourselves look like, and what does setting boundaries that create space for us to check on ourselves repetitiously look like?
That's a good question. I call it empathetic confrontation. Write that down if you're writing something. Empathetic confrontation. And what I mean by that is we have to, as men, learn the capacity to be curious with ourselves. And what I mean by that is curiosity, reflection. Why am I doing this? What am I up to? What's actually motivating me? What unresolved trauma or developmental issues am I carrying into my adult life that is keeping me from actually living an authentic life? Am I living an authentic life? And so what we're asking us to do today and begin to develop the practice of is being curious with ourselves and holding ourselves accountable. See, sometimes it's easy to let ourselves off the hook. And one of the things we talk about often in therapy is, well, doc, I talk to myself, and when I had a conversation with, why would you have a conversation with yourself? You're sick. But it's easy to have a conversation with ourselves because we're going to condone our mess and condone the unhealed spaces in our lives. And so additionally, what I would add to that self-boundary is getting in a space where you find a good therapist.
Yeah. It's true.
Hello, not enough claps. Therapy, whether it's with a pastoral counselor, clinical counselor, someone that has done his own work, in the process of doing their own work, will absolutely revolutionize your life. Why? Because it will allow you every week for 50 minutes or 45 minutes to slow down. How many of us need to slow down? To slow down and not care about family, not deflect onto anybody else. The mirror is on you, and for 45, 50 minutes, you get an opportunity to really come clean with yourself. And so I would add that self-boundary is the process of becoming clean with yourself. It's telling yourself the truth about yourself. It's not hiding what we all see. It's beginning to take accountability, but not stopping there, but then saying, I'm going to be empathetic with myself. I understand that I came from trauma. I understand that I came from this or that. I'm going to have the empathy to go through the process of healing that's going to get ugly, that's going to feel bad. Emotions are going to come up, but I'm going to stay the course because I honor the life that I have, and I want to be the best me, the best version of who I can be.
That's beyond powerful. We struggle with looking in because oftentimes, and I'm generalizing, but oftentimes we are afraid of what we might discover. We are afraid of what will be, well, one, what we might discover. Two, can we handle what we discover? Three, who will we be when we discover it? Because knowledge is accountability. There's one Proverbs where it says, with much knowledge comes much grief. And so it's frightening. You know that there's some, I liken it to a house that you have always lived in with a room that you never go into. And you walk by that door and you hear the sounds of a monster groaning and growling at that door. And anytime you get close to it, it groans and it growls at you in a threatening way, and you decide, never mind. And you go live in other parts of that room, or other parts of that home, rather. What do you say to a person who, even hearing this instruction and this wisdom, because I truly believe if there's something behind that door, as we talk like this, that monster gets loud because we're getting closer to that door and we start hearing that monster. What do you say to the person, to the man that believes in what you're saying, but what is stronger than that belief in the instruction that you're giving is the fear of opening a door and not being able to recover as a result?
That's powerful. And I think one of the things that I talk about is, to your question, a couple of things come to mind. First, you have to develop a strategy or a plan of action to determine how much of the work you can do at this time. Because sometimes patients come to me and say, I want to work on all of this, but they don't have the capacity, the internal capacity or the external capacity, because they're working a 40-hour job, they have 2-3 children, they're married, they just had a new transition. So you have to first determine what part of the work you can get up to at this time to begin the work. The second thing is that you need internal, but you need external resources. So those that are close to you, if you are engaging or about to engage in a deeper level of exploration, you've got to get buy-in from your partner, your wife, your children. You've got to be honest. You don't have to tell them everything that's going on, but you say, hey, I'm going to have a process for the next couple of months of understanding myself more deeply. Here is what I need. Here is what I'm asking from you. And you hear your wife, and you hear your children, and you let them ask questions of you. You become transparent in the process. I think a lot of men, what we do is we want to go to that door, but we want to go by ourselves. And what's behind that door, we need somebody to help us to to open that door and to hold our hand through that process. And so there's a level of vulnerability that has to be developed and taken in for us to even get to the door to open it. And so we have to have, one, that internal capacity. Am I ready for this work? What is the work? What is behind the door? And do I have the internal capacity? What do I need to shift? What do I need to change? Who do I need to tell so that while I'm going through the process, I have some undergirding and some support while I'm going through that process? And I think the third thing that I would often tell people, and even myself as I was going through therapy in the early years, is to normalize that this is a hard process. And so it's okay if you open the door and put your foot through and say, no. Close the door and go get some more power, go get some more reserve and come back to the door. It doesn't matter how often you have to come and slam the door. The important thing is that you show up and that you're taking agency over your life.
I love it. I can tell you right now, therapy has played a vital role in my life. I grew up in the church culture and context that basically told you, and we all, it's an overplayed conversation, but it's a real conversation. The church culture that tells you, you don't need no therapist. You might have a PhD, but I got Jesus. I got my word. I got 66 books and all this sort of stuff. And so I had to unlearn some of that garbage. It's nonsense, and we've seen the fruit of that. But therapy, some of the most critical decisions I've ever had to make, some of the most critical challenges I've ever had to face, therapy was always a part of it, and my moves were successful and fruitful as a result of it. There is a passage of scripture, man, that's powerful. It's in the Proverbs. I can't tell you exactly where it is, but you know what I'm going to say. Read your whole Bible, you'll find it. And it says, where there are no oxen, the crib is clean. Where there are no bulls, the stable is clean. It says, but much increase comes by the strength of the ox. It's a powerful passage. Essentially, it's saying that where there is no bull, where there is nothing, where everything is clean. So right now you can be dysfunctional but organized. Organized dysfunction. You know where everything is, that's good, okay? Well, I'm not gonna say that's good, but you're good because you know where everything is. It is clean, it's organized. But it says, but much increase comes by the strength of the ox. The idea there is that the ox is gonna make the stable a little dirty. In other words, you got to get a little messy, but it says increase comes by it. So that means that if I don't do the work, if I'm not willing to get dirty, it's hard. You're right, it is hard. I ain't gonna lie. Man, when I went to therapy in 2012, I think it was, for the first time, man, that lady reached in and she was so smooth with it. She was so smooth. She said, just so kind, just sweet, and let's hear what you're going. And man, she snatched my heart out my chest. And it was the best thing that ever could happen to me, because my house, my emotional house, had been built in many cases, certain parts, with bricks of brokenness. Because brokenness sometimes will build your house. I want to shift into, wow, man, it's time, we can go. I want to shift into, you talked about different types of stress. You talked about, I'm going to listen to this again, so I'm being engaged and I'm not taking my notes, but one of them was contextualized stress. The other one was, it had something to do with trauma and acute, but we'll put acute to the side because it seemed like it was those two, differentiating between those two types of stress and really going on a journey to begin to address them. Can we go back to that? Because my goal is to get us to understand that better, and perhaps it will set up our conversations and our prompts for around the table. Can you touch on that? Help us to differentiate between the two and how to attack them.
I think it's important for us when we talk about this stress, this contextual, versus the etiology, right? When we talk about etiology, we're talking about where did this stress originate. And I think it's important for men to really think about the various sources of our stress. And I would like you to, if you hear any of these sources that you can identify or that resonate with you, I'd like you to write it down so that when you're in your breakout groups, you can more deeply explore it. But there are some sources of stress for men. The first source of stress is what we call early adultification. Oh, yes.
Wow.
Early adultification. And that is the process that boys encounter and are socialized where they don't get to be little boys.
Ooh. Oh, man.
Oh, you hear it. That's my little man. Or you hear a father saying, man up. Right. There are many of us who have experienced during our development a socialization process where we didn't really get to feel or enjoy childhood as a child because there were so many misconceptions about how we were supposed to be and behave that our childhood was absolutely snatched from us. And we often wonder why girls are so happy in contrast to boys, because they're socialized in a way where they get to actually enjoy being little girls and being nurtured, where we are often adultified. You see it in the school system when you think about behavioral issues and who gets suspended more often and who are on psychotropic medications more often than not, our black boys. And so there is an archetype in our society and an archetype even in our community where boys are adultified, where they are not able to have a full range of life experiences and emotionality. If that's you, I want you to be honest today and put your hand up. The other source, or another source of stress for many men, is what we call cultural exclusion. A good brother wrote about this many years ago in his book called Invisibility Syndrome. It is that thing that has happened as a consequence of the collective consciousness of our world, where black boys and men are invisible but are seen. They are seen, we are seen because there's often the idea that we are problematic. And so there's always a gaze on black masculinity and black males and males in general, because society says we have to keep an eye on these people because we don't know what they're up to. Wow. And so we're seen not for good things, but because people are trying to socially control us or to keep us in our place. And then we're not seen because nobody cares about the full humanity of black boys and black men, and men in particular. How many movements outside of Bishop Jake's Manpower and the one we had a couple of months ago, sustained movements, have you seen where black men are the focal point of healing and the discussion? I'll wait. Because we have an invisibility syndrome that's across nations, across societies, where people really don't think much of who we are, don't think much of our capacity. I remember, can I testify? I was dating in grad school, and this woman I was talking to, she said, "Oh, I don't expect you to be my friend. I don't think you have the capacity. Black men don't have the capacity to be my friend." Now, she was not, and she is not a unicorn. There are many couples that I counsel where the wife doesn't have any real expectation that her husband has an emotional world.
That's true.
And so many of us are walking around having internalized this invisibility syndrome and have put it on ourselves, and we don't really think much of ourselves or think much of our own capacity. Wow. If that resonates with you, please raise your hand. The other stress for masculinity or men is what we call the burden of performance masculinity. There is a new movement where if a man shares his emotions and feelings, he's soft. Did you hear about this movement? Have you been hearing about it on the podcast? And so there's an expectation that the only thing that you as a man are good for is what you can give me. Wow. Provide for me. Meet my needs. Give. And we have been bamboozled as men because we want something back, that we have silenced ourselves. We're walking around with high cortisol levels of stress, trying to meet the needs of others because this is what we've been told masculinity is. And what I'm asking you today is to take the risk to shake that definition of masculinity off and begin to think about a more expansive, reimagined way to be in the world. Because there is a psychological, spiritual consequence of having and internalizing what we call this hegemonic, rigid idea of masculinity. Wow. The last thing that I want to mention, I can go on and on, is as another source of stress for most men is this underdeveloped emotional regulation. Many of us, as a consequence of the way we've been socialized, have really not been able to develop the ability to tolerate no. To tolerate not now.
Wow.
To tolerate that the success that we want is a process. And so we have to reimagine and build these skills where we can tolerate the emotions that we're holding, watch this, without reacting in a way that destroys our lives. You see, there are three ways that we mostly deal with stress. Fight. That means we externalize it, right? We don't take it in on ourselves. It's too anxiety provoking, so we have to give it out to someone else. Flight, which is a form of avoidance. I'm not even talking about it. I'm going into my cave. I don't want to talk about it. Brother, it's been 3 weeks. We've got to talk about it. It's a way of avoidance. And the third way is freeze. And freeze is a form of disassociation. And there are different ways in which we often dissociate. Drugs. Oh, we say, well, maybe it's not drugs. Sex. We still say, well, maybe it's gambling. Watch this. Maybe it's working longer hours than we have to work to stay away from home or whatever we're staying away. There are many ways that we dissociate, and sometimes the way we dissociate, we have defined those ways as positive, but when we deeply explore them, we begin to see that even the positive things that we're doing, sometimes we're using them as a way to escape and not deal with the stress in our lives.
We're going to have some very, very powerful conversations at our table. I pray that you've been taking note of these things, and I may ask Dr. Gadsden to go through those things one more time before we move into our sharpening conversations. There is one thing that I want to bring up. It's something that we talked about over the phone. It was something that I actually experienced with my own son recently. And I'll just, just full disclosure, I've got two sons. You don't know which one I'm talking about, so I'm not putting his business out there. You only be 50% right if you guess. But we have an incredible relationship. We always have. And I noticed that the relationship began to take a little turn as he entered into adulthood. He entered into manhood. And as I still very close, but when it came to subjects around my expectation of where he should be, how he should think, how far down the road he should be, how he should approach life, we started having some issues. And we just could not really understand each other. Like, I'm expecting this. And my thing was, when I was 22, I'm 52 now. When I was 22, I'd been working for 3 years. I was out of the house. I paid all my I. And I was putting that same expectation. So for me, that normalized or created a sense of normalization about where he should be at 22. And this was the source of contention because and my beloved therapist, I shared it with her, and she put me in check. And she said, essentially, yeah, but the world that he is growing up into is not the same world that you are growing up into. And she didn't use this term. My wife is in school now, and she threw the term at me as I was explaining to her how off I was. She was like, oh yeah, you're talking about emerging adulthood or an emerging adult. I'm like, what is that? And essentially the idea is that young people are taking longer to find themselves, to find their purpose. And there are a lot of societal factors that play into that. The world has changed. Can you talk to us men? Some of us have sons. Some of us are sons. Can you speak to sometimes this disconnect in the perspective of what it should be like? We need healing. We need to touch on that a little bit.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for your self-disclosure. Thank you for sharing that with us. Let me answer this in a couple of ways. The first thing I want to do is I want to re-narrate what this can be. Because it need not be a struggle. This is a great opportunity for sons and fathers to deepen their relationship. Because at the root of what you may have been feeling, or what many fathers are feeling, is fear and anxiety about the world and about what's going to happen to our children. And so this is a great opportunity to re-narrate the conversations with our children and to not make it an either or you against me, but to talk from a vulnerable place of, listen, I love you. This is what I've gone through. This is what I've seen in the world. This is what I'm seeing. And sometimes I don't know where you're at. And I don't know where we're at. And I want to use this as an opportunity for us not to go back. I want to hear where you're at, where you think you're at. There's no judgment about where you're at. I just want to hear it. And I want to be the support that I can be at this developmental stage in your life. And so I think it's important, number one, that when we have these conflicts or these differences, is that we, first of all, as fathers, I have a daughter, not a son, but same piece, is that we have to think about, now, what is actually happening in me? What is this about for me?
Wow.
Am I living through my son? Am I trying to recapture something through my children? Or is this an issue of just anxiety and care that I am communicating in a spirit of conflict or anger, which makes my son or daughter miss the underlying love and message that I'm attempting to communicate? And so this is an opportunity for self-reflection again. What are you up to as a parent? What's motivating? Then number two, this is an opportunity for you to re-narrate the conversation and use this as an opportunity to deepen your understanding of one another and deepen your understanding of what each other needs at this stage of your life. and at that stage of your child's life. And so I think it's very important that we remember that our sons in particular and daughters are a mirror of ourselves. I just had a Facebook picture my daughter took. She went to a conference with her mom. We're both academics, and so she was at a conference and she had these specs on. She looked like a real, deep thinker. And I put on the Instagram, future Dr. Touré Gadsden. And in parentheses, I put clinical psychology. And I thought about that because she has, and she's 10, so who knows, but she has at this stage in her life, she could care less. When she comes to the office with me, she is not impressed that I run the department. She could care less. Sometimes what do you do again? She's an artist, she's creative, and so I have to remind myself, even at this age, that although it would be nice to have a mini Dr. Gadsden, that she has the agency and the right to choose another, not only career, but another life journey. And so I think it's important that, not even as it relates to careers, that we as parents have to not just honor our children's right to their own journey, but begin to deal with the anxiety that may get triggered in us as we are observing the decisions and the choices that they make that we would never make. And then lastly, I would say this, and I hope somebody could agree with me and be honest. Sometimes we tell our children a lot of stuff, and you lying. You didn't do any of that. If they only knew, Patty sung that song, if she only knew. If they only knew some of the places and decisions that I've made, if she only knew, she probably wouldn't listen to anything else I ever had to say. And so we have to give ourselves and our children grace.
That helped me. I was a little selfish. I got that. No, that's tremendous. Okay, we've got just a few seconds. Oh, I'm over 20 seconds. That's okay. We're gonna have our sharpening time. If you need Dr. Gadsden to list down some of those areas again that could speak to stress and how you got there, just by show of hands, lift your hands. If you wrote it down and you don't need him to do that, okay, 5 or 6 is enough. Can we just run through those one more time? And those will be our prompts, and we're going to talk through it and pray through it at our tables. And anything else you think in a way that would guide them in that conversation will be awesome.
So I'll talk about those stressors. I'll just list them again. And then I do have 2 questions that might guide some of the conversations. The first stressor we talked about is early adultification. Remember, that is the process that most men and boys have encountered as a part of our socialization process, where we were denied the full range of boyhood and the full range of emotionality. The second stressor for most boys and men is what we call cultural exclusion, that invisibility syndrome. We are seen for those things that are not positive, and then we are denied full humanity for those things in us that are positive. The third stressor is the burden of performative masculinity. Again, that socialization process that many of us have internalized, where we're only good if we provide, if we're only giving to others at the expense of setting boundaries for our own needs. The next is unresolved trauma. And the last one is underdeveloped regulation capacity, where we don't have the ability or have not been taught the ability to regulate, honor, and name our emotions. And I have just 2 questions that I think are important. I have 4, but I'll just use 2, that I think are important for us, perhaps as you are reflecting at your table, to think about. The first question is, what types of responses does your stressor usually create within you? What types of responses do your stressors usually create within you? Is it fight? Remember, fight is retaliation. Is it flight? Remember, flight is avoidance. Or is it freeze? Remember, freeze is disassociation. And then the second question, I think, to get us started is, what are your current internal, that's your intrapsychic, spiritual identity, and your external, that's what's around you, the people, the places, resources, and abilities that can help you handle your current stressors? Again, what are your current internal and external resources and abilities that can help you handle your current stressors?
Amazing. Outstanding. Okay, we're going to take a 20-minute sharpening break, and let's respond to those questions. And even though Dr. Gadsden will be back with us after our next speaker, can we just take a minute and celebrate God for the powerful, powerful insight that he has brought to us. Particularly, I believe that God has called us to walk together. And then when you share an experience like this, there is a level of not only accountability, and accountability, sometimes that word almost has a negative connotation. It's like I need to be, there's some drill sergeant over me. It's not so much that. It's about someone who's advocating for you, advocating for this moment. This is a new foundation. I want us to leave out of here with a new floor, and it's only up from here. So thank you again to Dr. Gadsden. I really, really appreciate him greatly. A couple of things really quickly before we bring up our next guest. We asked Dr. Gadsden to provide a list of resources, of mental health resources that we felt would be useful for those of us who are trying to get better, and particularly in the area of managing stress. So there's a QR code behind me. When they put that QR code up there, do me a favor and just get your camera and click it, because when you go to it, it'll take you to a page that has all those resources up there. I know it'll be up there in a second. When you see it, just grab it. We will have, after this session, there'll be, after this session, and then we're going to have a sharpening session, slightly shorter. We'll have a time for Q&A. We're going to bring Dr. Gadsden, our next guest, back up, and we'll have a Q&A session. And at which point in time, if you want to write your questions down now, you can. If you're watching on the stream, we'll call for it, and you can just put your questions on the screen, and then those who are up here, those who are here in the room, we're going to have a couple of lines, so you'll have a chance to ask questions. And so we're going to cover a lot of information, but if you have questions that you feel are really meaningful, write them down so that you can ask those questions later, as I really believe that God is building us up and edifying us. I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, and I'll give you a little bit of background on him. He is humble. We had to squeeze a bio out of him, but I will give you one, and I think I'm okay to share this particular fact. Many of us know it is public. Our bishop had a health scare a few weeks ago, and it was serious. It wasn't, it was a very, very serious situation. And this particular guest speaker that we have oversees a hospital network, which I'll tell you about in just a moment. He oversees that network. And he met our bishop. When our bishop got off of the ambulance at the hospital to go into emergency surgery, the first person he saw when he opened that door was our speaker. And our speaker stayed there with him the entire time, oversaw the surgery, oversaw every single process and detail, until he knew that Bishop was okay. Stayed all night, the whole thing, watching him. Come on, somebody. His angel. And I'm so grateful for him. I want to introduce our speaker, Dr. Joseph D. Amos. He received his medical degree from Morehouse School of Medicine and has been in practice for more than 30 years. He is the executive trauma director for Methodist Health System. He's a trauma chief at Methodist Dallas Medical Center. He's the president of medical staff at Methodist Dallas Medical Center Trauma, and he's a critical care surgeon. He specializes in trauma surgery and surgical critical care, and is experienced in trauma and surgical care and surgical oncology. Among other accomplishments, he is an author. Dr. Amos is a proud husband, father, son, and servant of the Most High God. I had a chance to spend some time with him. He is anointed, and he is just as proficient in the Spirit as he is in medicine. Do me a favor, help me welcome Dr. Amos to the stage.
Greetings, men. Pastor Touré, thank you for the warm welcome. Shout out to, can't put in words all he's accomplished, to Bishop Jakes. I was privileged to be there.
Thank you.
You know, we thank the Lord. We thank the Lord. And I'm sure Bishop would be okay with me just saying this. When I met him in the ambulance bay, the Lord told me, this is not unto death. Bishop still got work to do. I want to talk today, I want to get to the point of where we touch the supernatural, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to explain a little bit about myself, telling you what I do. A typical day for me is filled. Sometimes I'm on trauma call all night, and the pager goes off, and they say level 1 trauma in the ED. I know for a fact that there are some of you out here who have family members that have come through that emergency room that I've been involved with their care. There is an epidemic of homicide in Dallas. We treated a police officer who was my fraternity brother. I have to say shout out to Omega Sci-Fi out there. All right, rude dogs. He recently, you heard about the police officer that was ambushed. He came to our facility. We've treated celebrities, stars, rappers, but I have my youngest with me today, Noah. He's a freshman at Morehouse, and we're proud of him. My other son, the other children haven't all made it back yet, but proud of all the kids. But when I look at him, part of what makes me do what I do, there's not many of us in the country taking care of us in the roles that I play. And when your sons and your nephews and your family members and your brothers come in, they see patients, I see my sons. I see your sons. And a lot of times the pager goes off and I go down and it's a gunshot wound to the abdomen, and something the news is already reporting about it, and I'm meeting these young kids in distress, and sometimes we take them up to the operating room and open their belly up, and it's a belly full of blood, and we're trying to get control of the bleeding. Other times we'll crack the chest in the emergency room. We'll take our knives and split the ribs open and go out. I've done open cardiac massage. I've put staples in hearts. I've done all kinds of things to people. But I mentioned the supernatural because I want you to understand that we are dual citizens. We're citizens of the physical world, And we're citizens of the spiritual world. And your citizenship of this physical world is going to come to an end. But your citizenship of that spiritual world will have no end. And so when we talk about stress and we talk about what's going on, we have to deal with both realities. And so a lot of times, you know, I'm sitting there and I'm treating some young kid, and then I have to go out and tell his mama that he didn't make it, you know, and somebody killed him over some shoes. You know, somebody shot him over a beef, you know, or a girl. So this was said on the podium today, and I thought it was providential. When God made Adam and Eve, and particularly Adam, it hit me recently in study. He said to Adam, he said, be fruitful and multiply and replenish. And then he said, subdue and have dominion. And I said, Lord, why did you tell him that? He was in paradise. He had everything he needed. There was nothing that he wanted for. Why would you say that? It was because he was already in a military situation. And God knew that Satan was coming. And I want you to understand, men, God has called us to subdue and have dominion. And I want to talk about this from that perspective. We're being blitzed right now. The black community, black men are being blitzed. And you know, the reason why, you know, all you guys that watch football like I do, you run blitz because you want to make the quarterback get the ball out of his hand. You want to create confusion. And you know, the greatest quarterbacks are the ones that know how to handle the pressure. They know how to get the ball out of their hands. They know how to read the defense. They know how to make an audible at the line. And we've got to train our young men to know how to handle a blitz. So I'm going to say, Lord, speak to our hearts, Holy Spirit. As the songwriter says, give us the words that will bring new life. Words on the wings of a morning, that the dark nights will fade away if you speak to my heart now. I don't want you to hear from Dr. Amos because I'm just a man, and if you hear from me, you'll still not have what you need. I'm asking God to speak to us tonight. I'm going to tell you, in the time that I have, I'm going to speak to the physical, I'm going to speak to the metaphysical, to the spiritual, and then I'm going to speak of a solution. Because we have a lot of times where we sit around and we talk and we make it complex and we walk out and we write our notes and we feel good, and then all of a sudden, boom, you know, life hits us and we forget it. You know, Mike Tyson said everybody has a strategy until they get punched, right? The average life expectancy of black men in the U.S. is 71 years of age compared to 77 for white men. The difference parallels our socioeconomic, poverty, healthcare access. We have a shortage of black doctors. When you go to medical school now, we're searching for black men that go to med school. We don't have young men going to med school, going to college at the rate that they used to go to. When you look at chronic disease, we're always number one. When you compare the effects of violence and systemic inequities, we're number one. Black men are 16 times more likely to die in this country than white men. The homicide rate for black men is 81 per 100,000. When you look at white men, it's about 5. Ages 15 to 34, homicide is one of the leading causes of death. Now, we talk about police brutality, and the public, sector and the media loves to hype it up. But the reality that I live, it's just us men here talking, right? We killing each other. We killing each other. We killing our neighbors' boys. We fighting with each other. We've got to take over. We got to take back our community. And so when you go on, the other thing is incarceration. There are about 1,186 per 100,000 black men incarcerated compared to 222 white men. So the women have been loosed, but the men are still incarcerated. The women have been set free, but the black men are still incarcerated. When you look at the rate of single-parent homes, 64% of young black men are in single-parent homes compared to 24% of white. What is paradoxically interesting is, and it was alluded to a little bit by the other speaker, is the homicide rate amongst white men is twice that of black men. So we live in a society where people that are privileged, that have more economic opportunity, that have more doors open, that didn't come through slavery, that don't understand Jim Crow or racism or any of that stuff, or are victimized by police brutality, feel like life is not worth living and they're killing themselves. We came through a hard time in this country. We have 400 years of chattel slavery, but black people never killed themselves at the rate that white Americans kill themselves. But things are changing. Our young black men are now taking their lives more. As we have assimilated into society, we find that it's going on. I was just sharing at the table that, we are what we eat. And I look at a lot of our young black men that we see, and they've been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. But when you look at the diet of our kids, McDonald's, Burger King, Chick-fil-A, sugar, carbonated drinks. So you got these kids that are hyped up on sugar, and then the first thing they do is put them on a medication for the rest of their lives. And then they wonder why they act out when they're in situations. Emotional intelligence is big. We need dads in the house. Mom is one thing, but dad handles things a little differently. My son will say that. There are times when mom is, rubbing his shoulders, and I'm like, hey, we got to have a talk here, young man. Emotional intelligence means, how do you handle the stress of the moment? How do you react? We look at these pro football players. Some of them don't want to go out and play on the field. Some of them walk off the field. Some of them take their shirt off and run off the field. When you're in these situations, we say keep it real, but you kept it real, now you don't have a job. We got to learn how to use our emotion. We got to be just as emotionally intelligent as we are intellectually intelligent. We are dying because we have no emotional control. So I'm going to quote a young man. He said, all my life I've had to fight. All my life I've had to fight. And I'm quoting him because there's a reality there. But I'm going to say something, and it's going to be sharp for a lot of people to hear, because I think we have to speak out, though, because what we eat is what we become. We fell in the garden eating. We fell eating. What are you eating? What are you eating? What's going in your ear gate? What's going in your eye gate? It ain't just food. You listen to what I have 3 in college right now. When I go in, and don't get me wrong, everybody says when you get older, you act like everything was different. But the music today is misogynistic. We're the only group of people that call our women bees and hoes. Name me a white artist that you know that's been killed in a drive-by shooting about a beef. We can start listing young black men. We lost one here. He came to my hospital. His name was Mo 3. You guys know he was gunned down on the highway. We were there. We received his remains. So you look at what goes on in the world today, and you look at what's happening in society, and you ask yourself, where are the solutions? When I met with Pastor Touré, and we had a great talk, a real fellowship. And, I was thinking about what will I say to these men, because I'm always reminded of the story that when Jesus was up in the mountain and he took Peter, James, and John, and he was transfigured, and they were scared. I mean, he showed who he really was, and they saw Elijah and Moses with him, and they were like, man. You know, Peter said, let's go into the building program. We're going to build a church for you, you know, Elijah and Moses. You know, because he was scared. You know, he wanted, you know, and then the voice thundered and said, this is my son, hear him. He's different. But they came down from that mountain and they met the other 9, and there was a crowd of people and there was a man there, and he said, I brought my son to your disciples, and they couldn't handle him. They couldn't cast him out. And he said, if you can, and Jesus said, what do you mean if I can? You know, he said, oh, this generation, how long am I going to be here? I'm only got 3.5 years of ministry. So the man said, Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. And the disciple said, Lord, why couldn't we cast him out? Why couldn't we handle it? He said, this kind come out by fasting and praying. Well, that ain't the church we got today. We ain't fasting and praying. You know, we got too many saints that ain't they eating whatever they want. But the truth of the matter is, I thought about that. You know, we're coming to church. We're going to places. We're seeking help. But we're not casting it out. We're not being delivered. We're walking away. I mean, the church, you know, there's a broad group of people here. And I know there are people here that are watching porn. I know there are people here that have come out of addiction. We have in the church, you know, let's keep it real. We got sexual addiction. We got marijuana addiction. We got cigarette addiction. We got food addiction. And so when we come to a time like this, you know, I always say, Lord, when they come, let us have the ability to actually deal with the problem. Why could we not cast him out? This kind. That's what we're dealing with right now in this society, is this kind. So I want to bring it home. As I kind of close things down, I want to tell you, the body's made of dust. That's the physical man. And the spirit and the soul are the invisible part. That's the other dual citizen. God made Adam out of the dust, and then he blew the spirit into Adam, and Adam became a living soul. Okay, so we're soul. Now, what happened was Satan's plan was to separate us from God. And that's always been his plan, and that's his plan right now. He could not take on Adam, who had been commissioned by God to subdue and conquer and have dominion, until he separated him from God. Now, when Adam was made, the Spirit of God lived with Adam, and Adam could walk in the presence of God, and Adam was powerful. But Satan came in, and, you know, he said he went through his wife, and he's still going sometimes through our wives. That's still our weakness a lot of times. Say amen. If you married, you know what I'm talking about. But Adam and God made Eve, so we know she was fine. She was fine. Come on now, God made her. That was probably the finest woman that ever been made. And Adam was looking at that fine woman, and then he looked at that tree. Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. So he followed, but the thing that happened was Adam died that day, and God told him, the day you eat, you shall surely die. But Adam didn't die physically, he died spiritually. Spiritual death is when we're separated from God. Now, his spirit still existed because it's eternal. But when you're not in the presence of God, there's no life. And so when we deal with stress, we'll talk about stress, we have something called the fight or flight syndrome, where you release catecholamine. Your heart rate speeds up. Your blood vessels dilate. Your pupils get bigger. and you get into fight or flight. That's a stressor. And I know people want to make stress go away, but I think when I read have dominion and subdue and conquer, God knew he was putting us in a stressful situation. Without God, we can't handle it. But with God, we're more than conquerors. What needs to happen right now is we've got to quit eating things that are pulling us away from God. So it's not just the food, it's not just the alcohol and the drugs and the sugar and the caffeine. You know, when I listen to what these boys are listening to in college, day in, day out, it's violence. It's unchecked sexuality. It's profanity. It's our children are eating it 24/7. They come to church on Sunday, but all day long they're listening to these guys talk about it. And we've been kind of silent in the church. Some people have even celebrated it. And then when it comes to light that, you know, this rapper, you know, shot 10 people, everybody acts shocked. But the culture has bred it. It's not popular, but we've got to do something about that. We've got to take a stance. I talk to my kids all the time. I say, what are you listening to? How are they talking about? You have a sister. You have a mama. How do you take what he's saying? And now we've got the young sisters on the stage putting it out there. So now we've allowed the strip club to come into our homes and into our kids' lives. The other issue is our kids are taking social media 24/7. It's a false reality. Young women think they should look like what they're seeing on Instagram. A lot of times these images are doctored and you know they've been touched up. They're not real. So now they're eating this stuff 24/7. They've got the media. They've got social. You know, I'm a movie file. I love The Godfather. You know, that was one of them. But when you listen to the movies now, every other word, all of the images, all of the messaging, we are being bombarded with this. The reason I bring it up is because Paul said in Ephesians 6, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm telling you that we are being attacked in the spirit realm. And it's being manifested in the physical world. We're stressed out, but we're separated from God. We're being fed stuff that's not good physically, spiritually, emotionally, and then we're walking away sick. And we're wondering why we can't fight. And that's part of the problem. So, kind of as I bring it along, the Spirit is what allows us to interact with God. So it's the most remote part of man. So when you talk about man and our spiritual anatomy, you can see the physical man, but what's talking to you right now is the spirit man. And God he's a speaker. God, he spoke the word, so we speak. Okay? We read, we write. The rest of the animals, they can't read, they can't write, they don't speak. We speak because God spoke. It's kind of considered a departure from my profession, but you know I believe in generations that have evolved through microevolution. I don't believe in macroevolution, because if you came from a monkey, then a monkey's got to have a soul. If a monkey doesn't have a soul, then I couldn't have come from a monkey. Let me just say this. I've sat in autopsies and watched them dissect every part of a man into pieces. I've looked at every fragment, every organ. I've done things that you would not imagine to human beings in an attempt to save lives. And I was thinking about love, because, you know, if I'm up here, Paul said that if I speak with the tongues of men and angels and I have not love, I'm just a sounding brass and a tinkling cymbal. And the Bible says that God is love. And, you know, our scientists say love is a biochemical reaction. And I said, well, God is a spirit. So how is he having a biochemical reaction? Does that really make sense? I think the biochemistry of mental disease, I think the biochemistry of depression, I think the biochemistry of stress is a reaction to the spiritual attack. I think that's the problem. And so we treat the symptoms, we go into the physical, and we don't deal with the root. And I share this all the time. I said, if everything that you are is in your brain, when you get put in that casket, they put your brain there. So that would mean that what do you have for the afterlife? If everything that we are is in that brain, what happens when that brain is no longer in our body or no longer alive? Can we still see? Is mama looking down? Her eyes are in the casket. What's she looking down with? Does mama still love you? The brain is in the box. How does she love you? We are spiritual beings. We need to hear that. We are spiritual beings. We're under spiritual attack. Satan is trying to separate us from God spiritually because he knows that when greater that is in me is greater than he that is in the world. I've been through some dark times. The Lord has kept me through them. But I will tell you that in those dark times, a lot of times you say, how am I going to make it through the night? And, I was praying over the last year. I had a really, really tough year. I have a demanding job. People ask me, how do I deal with it? I said, I'm like a military guy. So if you come in shot up, I'm not going to get stressed out anymore. I've seen it all. That doesn't stress me out. Having to go talk to your mama, having to go talk to your wife is stressful. Treating you and operating on you and sewing up, that doesn't stress me out. And, I was telling the Lord, in this dark place I was in, I was saying, I feel you're so distant. I need your help. And I prayed. It was a week of prayer. And finally the Lord said, he said, what I put in you cannot be broken because I'm in you. You can break the body, but what I put in you cannot be broken because so if he's in you, I don't care what you're going through. I don't care what's happening in this world. If he's in you, you can't be broken. You cannot be broken. A lot of people, what is stress? That was one of the things. From a medical perspective, it's the body's normal response to challenges and threats and unpleasant pressures. It causes emotional and mental and physical tension. Okay, like I said, in medical school, they talked about the release of catecholamines. That's your norepinephrine. The body, reacts to it. And it takes its toll over time. I was looking and I was reading a study and they were talking about the effect of video games. Everything that you get while you're playing a video game is equivalent to stress. You just don't think of it the same way because you're getting some pleasure from playing the game. But you're hyped up. These kids are hyped up and they're shooting at people and they're having releases of catecholamines and their dopamine is flowing. And that's why the kids are so addicted to it and they don't want to sit in class and read. And they don't want to sit in class and listen because all day long they're getting this other stimulus. And so the same thing is happening, but it's in a very subtle way having a negative effect on our kids' ability to learn and to manage. And so we want to know why people are so frustrated and why people are so angry and why people can't control themselves. Have you ever seen the video where there's the guy's been apprehended. He comes outside. He's surrounded by police officers. And they're like, come out with your hands up. And he comes out and runs at a cop, and they put 100 bullets in him. You say, what was going on in the... Maybe it was wrong. Maybe they should be... I work with police officers, a lot of African-American officers here in DFW, some good men and women. They work here at the Potter's House. Some good men. You talking about stress. Can you imagine being in that box and going to where they go in South Dallas in some of these scenes? I mean, I know what they say on TV, but I get some of the people that come in cuffed and still fighting. I've seen them come in armed and strapped and ready to go. It's a very complex situation. And so I want to make sure that we understand that's a very stressful situation. And now you're taking people that are under tremendous stress and you're asking them to make split-second decisions. And all the police officers will tell you that when it's life and death in there, a lot of times they're just trying to survive. So we got to have these conversations in our community. But I want to go on to the whole concept of this stress factor. So it's a blitz. I'm a sports guy. Tiger Woods, greatest golfer ever lived. The reason he's so great is in the pressure moments. When the lights are on, this cat drops a 20-foot curling putt. Everybody else is failing. Nothing like it. Muhammad Ali, he's over in Zaire, Africa. He's looking at that monster named George Foreman. The Africans are shouting, Ali, Boombaye! Ali's in that corner, boy, and he's looking at that guy, and that guy's saying, I'm going to kill you. Ali comes out just as cool as a cucumber, and in the 8th round, with the Africans shouting and sweat pouring off, he takes down Goliath. And George, I think Cosell says, Foreman is down, Foreman is down. We all thought that Foreman was going to kill him. Michael Jordan. We're not going to argue about the GOAT today. I know the young people. I know who they're for. I'm an MJ guy. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm an MJ guy. Every time he played in the championship, he won. I mean, they played tough then. These guys now, they fall out, and they're out for 3 weeks. Michael Jordan got hurt once. Michael Jordan is the bruz. I'm just saying. Patrick Mahomes. I call him Baby Goat. He hadn't won as many as Brady, but they blitz Patrick. Patrick gets you. Why are they able to handle the blitz? Why are they able to handle the stress? Preparation. Preparation. These guys are prepared. They've practiced. They've gone through these scenarios over and over again. We are going, and so my point to you is that stress ain't going away. We're in a pressurized situation. And all of these men in this room today, God has called you to be victors, to subdue, to conquer, to have dominion. We've been called to win. It's military term. Paul said that he finished his course. He'd run the race. He was ready for a crown. That's an athletic thing. He said, so, we're to fight with everything we got. One of the things we used to say was, there was a poem that we say that a lot of guys are going to know. It says, out of the night that covers me, black as a pit from pole to pole, I'll say the Lord that be, for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeoning of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years shall find me not afraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. God has called us to be the captain of our souls. God has called us to subdue and have dominion. You're going to have stress, but you're supposed to master it. If you go back and you read Genesis, Cain and Abel are there, and Cain gets upset because I think Adam told him, hey, we messed up and we tried to put some fig leaves on, which was religion, and God said that's not going to work. And so God goes out and he slays an animal, and so Adam and Eve are covered with bloody skins. It was the first time there was shedding of blood, because without the shedding of blood, there is remission of sins. So Adam taught his boys. So Abel understands, and he brings the proper sacrifice, symbolizing his faith in Jesus Christ that was to come. Cain brings fruit from the ground, and God doesn't accept it. Now, there was warfare going on, because I'm telling you, I never saw it before until I read it again. You guys may have heard this term. It's called a proto-evangelium. It is the first pronouncement of the gospel. When God gets Adam and Eve in the garden, he says, look, The seed of a woman. We know that women don't have seed. Gonna crush his head. He's gonna bruise his heel. That was the gospel being preached right there. That was the first pronouncement that the lamb that had been slain before the foundation of the world was coming, was on his way. And so they knew that he was coming. So when Abel offers his sacrifice, God accepts it. Cain gets tore up. God comes to Cain and says, hey, man, sin lies at the door of your heart, but you must subdue it. Now, if you read in the King James, it says master, but look it up. I promise. He said subdue it. What he was saying was, I've called you to conquer it, Cain. He didn't do it. He went out and killed his brother. Okay? Satan said, I'm going to destroy the human race. He was trying from that point on to destroy. The 6th chapter of Genesis, it got so wicked that God he repulsed that he had made man, you know, and so he was going to wipe everybody out, but Noah found grace. But look, quick story, my wife and I were talking about naming the youngest one, he's Noah, and she was like, Noah got drunk. And I said, babe, he saved the world first. It was okay. He had a little drink after he saved the world. He'd been building that ark for 100 years. Give him a little slack. So we were able to name him Noah. She went along with it. But Satan knew that God had made us in his image and in his likeness. We're God men. We're not God. We're God men. We were meant to reproduce him in the earth. So that's why we're under attack. My brother was talking about black masculinity, and I thought about how it's being merchandised. It's merchandised in athleticism. You know, black masculinity is charismatic. It's powerful. You look at those wide receivers that catch and toe tap and then go out of bounds. You look at those guys that are dunking the basketball. You look at those guys that are boxing. Think about slavery. We were pulled out of Africa for our strength. There is an attack on the black male in this country and around the world. It's amazing when people come to this country, they don't even want to be called black. I think a lot of people voted that way because they feel like, well, I see how they treat black people, so when I come here, I'm going to be something else. I mean, you know, I might be Cuban and my hair might be curly, but I'm going to be, you know, I'm not black. Everybody comes here, nobody wants to be black when they get to America. And yet the black man helped build America. So I didn't want to just talk and pontificate and give you guys a bunch of noise and give you guys stuff to, you know, go home with and 10 steps to handling stress and, you know, read a book and, you know, listen to music. And I really wanted to give you something that I have learned. So in the 6th chapter of Ephesians, Paul says, having done all to stand, he says, stand, therefore. And I'm a Marvel nut. I grew up reading comic books. Tony Stark, the Iron Man, you guys know him. Okay, when Tony doesn't have his armor on, he's a punk. Okay, he's brilliant, but he can't really, you know, if he goes in, the Hulk, pop, you know, he slaps him out of the way. He really can't fight. But when he puts on that armor, everything changes. Paul said, wear the helmet of salvation. He said, put on the breastplate of righteousness. He said, have your loins girded about with truth, your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel, the shield of faith, and the sword of the Spirit. God is looking for iron men. God is looking for iron men. This thing has gone crazy, not because of women, it's because of the men. Pastor Touré has a vision about it. We've got to bring the men back. Put on your armor. God is calling us to put on the armor. When we put on the armor, we become like Superman. When God is with us, Satan can't touch us. So we are suffering from the effects of stress, and we are suffering from the attacks of this society because we've been separated from him. We don't pray enough. We have to pray. The Bible says we should always pray and faint not. And in Romans chapter 8, 27, it says, we know not how to pray, but the Spirit maketh intercession according to the will of God. We've got to go back to praying. I'm not talking about 5 minutes. I'm not talking about thou magnificent God. I'm talking about, Daddy, I need your help. I have never told God, I've never asked him to help me, and he didn't help me. Now, I might say, I want this, I want that. You might not get that. But I've never gone to him and said, Abba, Father, help me. And he doesn't help me. God will help you. But I just want you to know, I didn't want you to leave here today. We might be Tony Stark some of the time, but when the attacks come, when the darkness comes, when the enemy comes, when the stress comes, when the assaults come, when your life is going crazy, when your family's going crazy, when your relationships are going crazy, put on the whole armor of God and be an armor man. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amos. That was powerful. Let's give it up one more time. A few things really quickly. Certainly his medical pedigree is unmatched. But he got up here and he was more than a doctor. He got up here and he articulated powerfully as a man of God. And I was just thinking about some of the things he shared. I was thinking about 3 John 2. Above all, I wish that you would prosper and be in health, even as your soul will prosper. And I'm just so grateful. He talked about the reality. These are things that we don't talk about as it relates to what we eat, what we put in our body. We are literally what we eat. And we have to take it seriously. As I mentioned from the very beginning, there have been moments where I've had more word than I had wind. And because I was physically winded, I had to take back and cut the sermon short. And so if we're going to be everything that God has created us to be, we have to make certain that what we're putting in us helps us. I'm not a doctor, but I take issue with... I'm going to mess it up because I'm not a doctor, but let's just go there for a second. When we talk about some of the health conditions that we have, particularly those that proliferate themselves in communities of color, we say, oh, well, that's just genetic. My dad had high cholesterol, and so, well, there's an argument to be made that you're eating the same thing your dad ate. You know what I mean? It's fried chicken. It's macaroni and cheese. And I know, first of all, let me just pause for a moment. I know that everyone in this room is not a person of color. And so, in fact, I want to give it up for all of those who aren't a person of color, but you're a person of the kingdom. Thank you so much for being here. You belong here. You matter. And I think, if anything, what I would say to those who maybe found moments of this conversation that they could not personally identify with or relate with because they're not African American or you're not a person of color. This is education. One of the things that we're missing in our world is empathy. And the enemy of empathy is ignorance. And when we are ignorant, we can't be empathetic. And if we can't be empathetic, we can't be like Jesus. And so thank you for allowing us to talk to our sons and daughters in your presence, because we need you and we need you to understand, and we appreciate you. Can we give it up for all those who are not African American? We salute you, we honor you, we thank you. Come on, somebody. Oh, no, we can do better than that. We can do better than that. You matter, your voice matters, your heart matters, your perspective matters, and what we also will commit to is to listen to you and to listen, hello somebody, and to listen to your perspectives and to seek to understand so that we can all come together in the spirit of the kingdom with intelligence and empathy and a desire to see unity, because I believe that we cannot move the kingdom forward unless we are one. Amen? All right. Thank you so much. I mean, this has been rich. And I don't know if I kind of got in the chat. The chat is lit right now. The online chat, people are watching from around the world. And women snuck themselves into that chat. I'm like, Sonia, what are you doing? But they're encouraging us. They're praying for us. They're leading us on. And I'm super excited. So I want to do something quickly. In the interest of time, I want to be really diligent to try to keep our hard stop at 12. I do want us to take a moment, talk just for 5 minutes, talk through what moved you in the last session and what changes you're going to make to your intake, whether it be your physical intake, your spiritual intake. If there's something that you need somebody to pray with you about, some area of struggle, in these 5 to 7 minutes, I want you to speak it. But here's what the Bible says in James chapter 5. James chapter 5 says, confess your faults to one another and pray for each other that you may be healed. That means that there's some healings, some anointings that will only be broken in the context of community and accountability and confessing it to somebody else. I have learned, I can tell you right now, what I can lay my hands on and impart unto you is to break the spirit of promiscuity off of you. I can do that because I can't give you what I didn't get, but that I can give you. Here's the point. The point is what you have overcome, what you have stepped over, what you have overcome, you can impart, right? Poverty mindset, I can impart that too, right? And so we don't have a lot of time, so I'm gonna shut up so you can get into it, but let's take a moment, let's have a conversation. And if there's some area, even if it's a food addiction, if there's someone, I can help you with that too. If there's someone, whatever it is that is keeping you from having the full opportunity to be fruitful and to multiply, let's speak it out. Let's come into agreement and let's believe that God's going to break it, as he says in several places in the scripture. Amen. I'm excited about this part of it. This is where we get to ask questions. We get to pull out from these incredible thinkers, these incredible men of God, in a way that is maybe more specific and tailor-made to what your needs are. So I'm going to invite Dr. Gadsden and Dr. Amos back to the stage, and we'll move into our time of Q&A, and I think we'll have about 20 minutes of that, and it's going to be good. So if you have questions, let me see here. I know we're going to be lining up on where are they lining up? Somebody, they coming to you. They're going to line up in front of you. Okay, and then so Pastor Dobbins, okay, and Bishop Anthony Odes. So if you have your questions, feel free to line up. I know that there might have been, was anyone online with questions, or I'll just kind of let you field them? No? Okay, let's roll. I got a question. I'll kick it off. Mindfulness. We start talking about stress tools. One of the powerful things that I really heard you say clearly, Dr. Amos, was that you're not going to eliminate stress. That's not going to happen. But we can manage it and do well. One, we can mitigate the effects of stress, even down to what we eat, what we're watching, what we're putting on. That was powerful. I never really thought of it that way. I mean, if you get sick, that's stressful too. So if your diet is affecting your health, then your health, well, but anyway, I digress. The point that I'm making is we can't eliminate it, but we can identify some of the causes. But mindfulness, for me, I'll tell you right now, I'm a breathing fool. I believe in meditating, and when I say meditating, I mean being aware of my thoughts, being aware of what's happening in my body, being aware of my breathing, etc. And it does help. I got diagnosed with high blood pressure 6 years ago. It never happened to me. And the onset of it was stress, literally. I took on an assignment and I didn't even know it. I was stressed out. And I went and got a checkup, and like, your blood pressure numbers are high. Never happened in my life. One of the things that helped me bring it under control was meditation, breathing, etc. So real quick, to the both of you, is mindfulness, meditation, breathing, what are your thoughts on that as it relates to becoming a stress tool that we could walk away with?
I'll just say one thing. I think those things are very helpful, particularly in the moment. A lot of times when I'm in meetings and people are coming at me, when I'm in an executive role and I've got people coming at me, I've learned how to breathe and to pause. But I'm going to say something that I think is important. Perspective. We forget about that. If you've got $1 million in the bank and your car breaks down, you don't get stressed out over it. If you even have no money in the bank and your car breaks down, you're stressed out. Perspective. The way that the earth looks from 50,000 feet is different from 20,000 feet when you're on the ground. The way you see life as a 15-year-old versus a 30-year-old versus a 50-year-old is different. I think perspective is so important, and a lot of times we forget the power of perspective. And even from a spiritual standpoint, when you feel overwhelmed, and this is what I tell people I talk to all, if I could email God, if I could text him, if I could call him on the phone, could I stress him out? Like, could I inform him of something new? Could I, he says, oh, I'm stressed. That's a big problem I can't handle. So we gain perspective when we're in relationship with him. That's so important.
I think that's good. I wanted to go back to the issue around stress before I answer that. And I want us to really continue to differentiate contextual stress and stress as a symptom of something underlining. Because I do think that stress, depending on the categorization, there are some stressors that we don't have to live managing, that we can have healing and deliverance from. And so I don't want us to stay in this mediocre space to think that stress is inevitable all the time, because we're not categorizing or differentiating what we're talking about. There are some stressors that are normal stressors, that are contextual, that will always be with us. But there are some things in which we're stressed about that we absolutely have the power to have dominion over and delivered from. So I just want to make that clear. I think that the other piece is around meditation. I think it's a powerful thing. And when we think about meditation, when I think about it, of course it is scriptural. I think about one's focus during the meditation and what meditation has the capacity to do. Number one, it gives us the capacity to slow down again, to stop, and to re-engage with every part of ourselves, to reimagine, to put on silence the things that we are worried about, and to recommune or to reintegrate with that split off part of ourselves that Dr. Amos is talking about that is divine. And so I think that if we're using meditation as a way to recenter, re-engage with our divine source, and then during meditation, as we're re-engaging with our divine source, we have the opportunity to hear from God. We have the opportunity to get new direction from God. We have the opportunity to re-see and re-narrate what we think is happening in our lives, leaving us, taking us from a lower level consciousness of perception to a more divine understanding of what's happening.
That's powerful. That passage, Psalm 46, I think, and 1 or 10, but it says, "Be still and know that I am God." Look at those two words. Be still, stop, cease, meditate, connect, and know, knowledge comes that I'm God. That's powerful. So you can change your circumstances through that. Okay, let's take some questions.
I have one online.
Beautiful.
Yes, I believe this is for Dr. Amos. What are some foods or meals that you have discovered that are effective and healthy and economically friendly that have been serving you well?
It's a great question. I talk to people all the time and they go, I can't afford organic. And I always say, do you know what the price of chemotherapy is? Seriously. So I was just talking to the brothers at the table. Adam and Eve didn't eat meat. I'm not a vegan, but we have a bunch of flat teeth in our mouth. If I put you on a stranded island, like I said, and I shot a deer and killed it, you couldn't eat it without a knife and some fire. But if I knocked down a couple apples and some oranges and some pears, you could eat those. I do believe that a vegetable-based diet is powerful. I think we should eat protein, but we should eat it in moderation. I think that it's important to wash your food and to see where it is sourced. It's, black communities and Hispanic communities and other communities are food deserts. And a lot of times the only thing they have there are liquor stores and fast food. Fast food is cheap for a reason. It's cheap for a reason, and it's killing America. So I'm a big component. And the last thing I'll say, and I was just talking about, a lot of people have been talking about apoptosis, how when you fast, you're able to scavenge free radicals and the cells heal themselves. If you talk about cancer cells are rapidly dividing. They're very metabically active, whereas your normal cells aren't. And so that cancer cell is growing while your normal cells are kind of going at this pace. So when you fast, who do you think's more hungry? It's the cancer cell. He doesn't have anything to eat. He dies first. And so they've seen that there's a lot, that the Bible was right, that fasting and praying is powerful. So I'm a big proponent of having times of resting the body, but I'm also, I say, so to answer the question, I think a vegetarian-based diet and limit your protein and be very picky about it will promote health and well-being.
I love this.
My name is Nigel McKeel, and I have a two-part question for Pastor Touré and Gadsden, if I can. Pastor Touré, being delivered for something, is it the desire is gone, or do I have control to deal with that situation when it does come? And Dr. Gadsden, you talked about chronic stress and it being your identity. How do you release that from your identity to walk in the fullness of who you are?
Okay, so I'll answer really quickly. Is the desire gone? It's yes and no. The desire to the point of your ability, the desire that goes beyond the point of your ability to resist, that level of desire completely is broken. Completely is broken. I could tell you a story, but I don't want to take up too much time. But I'll put it to you like this. When one of the big things that I had to overcome was promiscuity. I could not say no to women. I could not say no. And then I got breakthrough, real breakthrough. And there were steps that led to that breakthrough. The short version is I really had a desire to be free, motivated by my desire to not have anything between me and the Lord. And I knew that this particular struggle was keeping me from having an integrous relationship with God, because God and I would commit to God that I'm laying this down, and then I would lay down and then come back to God. And now our relationship, although there was mercy and there was grace, we couldn't get past that because this is something that God wanted from me. Now I realized I was going to be building a mega church in Hollywood with some of the most beautiful women on the planet. And this was a mandate. Can you imagine, had I not overcome that struggle, I would have been in the scandal the first week of ministry there. So the desire, okay, God, no, not just because I think it's the right thing to do, but the integrity of my relationship with you is being compromised by this thing. So I had a real desire to be free, and the Lord set me free. I went about 6 months without looking at a woman's body. So you know how it is. If you walk and you see her coming, and the way those hips do what they do, you can tell. You can't wait until those hips pass you, because you're gonna get you a gander. You know what I mean? I'm just being honest with you, and God, there was an incredible book called Every Man's Battle, That was really strong. But I literally would not look. I would just, God had anointed me with the strength to not do it and to not look and not to feel like I was missing anything. Now, I went to the mall. This is about 6 months in, and I wanted to know if I had been healed. I wanted to know if I had been healed. So there was a lady helping me. We were at Macy's, and I was buying stuff. There was a lady helping me, and she had on black spandex type of things. And I said, I need another size. And that meant that she was going to have to turn around and go get me another size. And so when she turned, I said, I want to see if I have been healed. And so this, over 6 months, I just bounced the eyes and didn't look or whatever. And so I decided when she walked away, I was going to test my healing. So she walks away. I look down and I see her backside. And a crazy thing happened to me. I got sick. I literally felt nauseous. And I didn't know how to feel about that. Because I want I don't want to lose my sexual prowess. But something truly happened. I got delivered from, and I was still, with my wife there, I was still good with that. But so to your question, yeah, I mean, God knows how to literally transform your desire. Does that mean that subsequent to that, and that was 24 plus years ago, does that mean that subsequent to that, I have not had any moments where I was like, whoa, no. But the desire to the extent that I now have to wrestle to not do it, I haven't been there at all. And it's been 24 plus years, and I've had ample opportunity. I hope that answered your question. I'm sorry it took so long, but I want to give you a real answer.
Brother, to your question as well, when I think about chronic stress and identity, I think it's important that we talked about therapy or having someone to help you navigate that developmental material. And what I mean by that is to figure out how the stress is impacting your identity. Is it impacting your identity in terms of your relational capacity? Is it impacting your identity in terms of your sense of worthiness and your feeling valid as a human being, as a spiritual being? Is it impacting your capacity vocationally, your ability to trust in your own efficacy? And so I think it's really important to first identify how the chronic stress is impacting what parts of your identity and then how it's showing up. Do you disassociate? Do you freeze? Do you act out? Because that is going to be important information that you'll need as you develop a strategy to begin to take a risk to do something different. I think when we talk about healing a lot, we really forget the important piece of taking a risk. And that healing, after you acknowledge something mentally and psychologically, the emotional part of the healing process has to become behavioral. And you have to begin to do something different. And you take those small steps and you begin to see, oh, I can do this. It feels different. And as you begin to do something different over time, that becomes a personality shift or a personality change. And so I think it's really important for you to begin journaling about where in your identity, what parts of your identity, how is it showing up in your identity, how is the stress showing up in your identity, because all of that is information for you as you begin to shift your sense of self.
I have another question online, and I believe this could be for anyone. It says, how do you become more present for an adult son who has gone through a lot but has isolated himself?
I think we touched on this a little bit earlier. I think the importance of, and it's full disclosure, I don't have a son, I have a daughter, but I think of it in terms of parenting in general, is the idea of vulnerability. Right, and having that hard conversation with your son and beginning to open the communication not around what you're doing wrong or what I don't like about what you're doing or what's wrong with our relationship, but around really reintroducing the idea of love, reintroducing the idea of care, and having that mutual curiosity with one another, and really being vulnerable. We talked around at the table about, being honest about your own struggles, being honest about your own development, and allowing your son to get a glimpse into your own journey, because that allows children to feel safe. It allows them to also be able to trust that you're not just trying to score, trying to put me in my place, or to just educate me without empathy, but that you really care about not just what I'm doing, but who I am and the relationship. So I think it's really about honesty. It's really about, having a safe space. I really am a proponent of having a third party, a mediator, to really help you at times and your children to see things from the other person's perspective, and to begin to not only see that from the other person's perspective, but to take that in and begin to develop a new way of seeing each other and thinking about your relationship that allows for mutuality, mutual vulnerability, and the ability to not be competing in your relationship, but to see each other for as you are.
Excellent, sir. He said you actually answered his question, so he sat down. Next question.
How you doing, sir? My name is Carlos Bolton. I have a question for you. You helped me last time with me having no family, as man thinketh, and I don't know if you remember that or not, but me growing up not having a father figure, but me becoming a father at 14 and 15, and my oldest being my son, and he's now 12 at the same age I was when I started off my life. It's kind of hard to be able to reflect onto him because I don't understand his position in life, because my position was I'm pretty much a grown-up at 12. And second piece I would like for you to touch on would be being able to manage business and family, because I always feel, because I started so young, I've had to work, and hustle. And now I run 2 businesses, working my 5th kid right now, I'm 27. But trying to manage being a father and presence, because you can be a dad but still not be there. But I don't want them to grow up and think, oh, my dad was around but he really wasn't there, because I'm always focused on business. But when I'm with them, I'm focused on business. When I'm with business, I'm focusing on them in my mind. And it's like a battle between the two.
Other panelists also have something to say about this. The first things that come to my mind is around your 12-year-old son is to ask. We've been talking about that today. Just to have that conversation and to ask him, what's going on with you? How are you seeing the world? What do I need to know? What don't I know that you want me to know? How can I support you? What do you need from me? And to be able to hear that and to be empathetic and to communicate your empathy to him and your care for him. I think the other piece that you're talking about, to me on some level, is to honor yourself and to be able to sit in your success and to honor the things that you have accomplished, and then to begin to create a system where the systems that you've created, right, can work on their own in a way where you can redevote some of that time and some of that energy, and not to have guilt about being in one place and not the other. So I think that comes with time, and that comes with developing a strategy, and as we talked about earlier, also having those not only internal resources that you already have, but building those external resources to build that strategy out.
The only thing I'll say is Satan is a divider. He divided Adam and Eve. He separated man from God. It's amazing how we start these relationships and we meet our love of our life, and then life divides us. Life tries to divide us from our children. And one of the lessons I've had to learn, and Noah has helped teach me this, my youngest, your kids should have a space where they can tell you whatever they need to tell you. I can't tell you how many parents find out that their kids were depressed because they took pills, or they get a call that their kids attempted suicide. Communication, it sounds corny, But the reality is you cannot allow your house to be divided. You cannot allow your children to be divided. You have to create a safe space. You have to make communication a priority, and you have to make fighting division a military strategic objective in your house. I will not be divided from my wife. I will not be divided from my children. I will not be divided from the people that I love.
Powerful. In the interest of time, we'll take 3 more questions, and then I want to honor we're a little over, but I want to honor our time.
How you guys doing today, man? So I got a powerful word from the Lord last week about how powerful it is to take your smile back. Proverbs says, a joyful heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit dries up the bones. So I went home and did some research on it, and I wanted to know what you guys thought about it. Studies show that a smile activates facial muscles that release endorphins, dopamine, and serotonin. These are our feel-good hormones that make us feel joyful. Some doctors refer to smiling as the natural antidepressant. Studies show smiling helps elevate our moods and reduce stress and relaxes our bodies. This includes relaxing our hearts and lowering our blood pressure. Some studies even show that smiling helps to reduce chances of heart disease. Endorphins produced from smiling are called natural painkillers. Scientists believe that even smiling when forced can reduce pain. Smiling also can help our immune system stay strong. Research shows that laughter and positive thinking increases immune response by raising levels of immune cells and boosting antibodies to help fight infections. This allows us to be less prone to diseases. So I wanted to know your thoughts on how important it is to take your smile back as it relates to stress.
Well, and keep it real. I mean, some days you smile, some days David said, if I had the wings of an eagle, I'd fly away. I think smiling's important, but I don't think it should be like a reactionary mechanism or a technique. Solomon said there's a time to weep, there's a time to cry, there's a time to rejoice, there's a time to mourn, there's a time to smile, and there's a time. And so, let us be led by the Lord. But I don't think it's a panacea, but I do agree that it's important, but to keep a right attitude. But the biochemical aspects of the releasing of the hormones and stuff, I don't think, somebody can say your mama just died and you smile and you release hormones and you feel good. So I think you take it as it comes. I think the wisdom of the Bible tells us that we just have to know what season we're in and take the time to celebrate life. And let me just say one last thing. The most important thing you can always do, and I do this in the morning, is I just raise my hands and say thank you. When I breathe in and breathe out, thank you, Lord. They're still alive. Thank you, Lord. I got a job. Thank you, Lord. I got food on my table. Thank you, Lord. Don't you start feeling better? Just to remember, we should be grateful that God has given us this life.
I think that gratitude piece that Dr. Amos is talking about is so powerful, and it induces that happiness and joy. Smile. I think deeper to what you're talking about, my grad students and I are about to start a study looking at black men and joy. Because I think at the deeper root is that there are a lot of black boys and black men who have no joy, who have not experienced any sustained joy, who have been so traumatized. We've been so socialized, as we talked about around adultification, that we don't know what pleasure is outside of sexualization, outside of those compulsivities. What is real pleasure? What is joy? What is play? When is the last time we played? When is the last time that we just enjoyed life? And so I think that there is something that for a lot of black men and boys that is missing, and that really is at the root of the smiling, is do you have joy? Do you have joy? And yes, the joy of the Lord is your strength, but how is that activated day to day?
Wow. But keep smiling. Keep smiling.
Love it.
How you fellas doing? My name is James Williams. This conversation we're having about dealing with stress and learning how to be more emotionally intelligent and also, growing personally with our own personal stress. I'm wondering if there should be or what the end goal should be as we're going through this process, each of us. Is there some sort of goal we should be looking for? Is there some sort of standard of manhood we should be working towards? As we're going through our own processes of growth and learning how to deal with our stress, what should our end goal be to working towards?
I think your end goal is the posture of growth, is the posture of commitment to doing everything in your power, to applying the things that resonated with you and where you are, and to one day at a time, one step at a time, to become better. There's no silver bullet for any of it. Paul, at the height of his accomplishment, said, "I have not arrived, nor am I already perfected, but I press on, that I might lay hold." So we are in a society where we want the life hack. How do I get from A to Z? I'm motivated by Z, and that's fine. And I say by B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, L, M, N, P. You know what I mean? One day at a time, and give grace to yourself on the way.
I like your statement about growth, because when you build muscle, what do? You stress it. All stress isn't bad. Stress is not a dirty word. The Bible says your tribulation worketh patience. Peter said your trials are more precious than fire. There is something being worked out in us. Black people are strong because we went through something. That's why, when I was talking about the suicide rate, you'd think we were more suicidal. But what we came through made us strong. So I don't want us to walk away thinking that stress is a dirty word. We use stress to make ourselves stronger. That's how you build muscles in the gym.
I love that. And I love the balance that is on this stage right now. This is really powerful, beyond what I even thought.
Posture of growth.
My dad has the question. I'm just going to translate.
Ok. Vai falar. Eu sou brasileiro.
He's Brazilian.
Sou físico e professor numa universidade no Brasil. Faço pesquisa e dou aula de física. E o mesmo problema que nós temos visto aqui existe lá no Brasil. Isso é um problema mundial.
I am a professor in university in Brazil. I'm a physician. And the same problem that we see in America, we also see in Brazil and we see in the whole world.
Então, a minha pergunta é como resolver esse problema que não é americano nem brasileiro, é mundial.
Right. So my question is how to solve this problem that's not only American or Brazilian, but it's the whole world.
E nesse caso, como eu vejo que o cristianismo é a solução, mas como a Igreja de Cristo pode melhorar este problema e dar solução para os homens e jovens negros como eu e meu filho?
I see Christianity is the solution, but how church can help even, black people like my son and I, how can church, we know that's the solution, but what can church do to apply this solution?
I'll say, and first of all, thank you so much for your question, and thank you for the great work that you're doing in Brazil as an educator and as a leader in the church. We're so grateful. And thank you for really causing us to remember that the desire to grow and to be all that God has called us to be is not an American thing. It literally is a global thing, and that perspective is really important and affirming and validating to our time together. As it relates to the church and what the church can do, I think things like this. We're really good at Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Acts. But we aren't good. Sometimes we're distrusting of experts in various fields, because if they're not Reverend so-and-so or Bishop so-and-so, somehow their witness is less credible. You want to translate that, or you want me? Okay. So I think it's to be really creative about creating spaces for people with the answers to be invited to speak into churches. And I say creative because sometimes you do have to be creative. You have to find the common ground, and you have to find the bridges. And so it takes prayer and creativity. But I think this is perhaps an example of doing that very thing, so that the kingdom isn't hindered or encumbered by ignorance. We have spiritual intelligence, which I think that if you're truly deep and spiritual enough, God will give you natural intelligence, but sometimes it gives you natural intelligence through those who are on the front line of natural wisdom.
He said, thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, family, this has been, I'm full. Can we give it up one more time for our guests? Dr. Amos to my right, Dr. Gadsden, thank you so much for your unique and necessary contributions. I believe that we're better. As Pastor Vinchard prayed, I believe our families are better. I believe we're going to be better as men. And this is, again, we have a growth mentality. You know, this is just one step forward, and we're going to continue to do it. A couple of things really quickly. The last book I wrote was called Balance. And I believe I have 5 copies of the book that I want to sow into you. Let me tell you who this book is for. And I wrote it for everybody. But this is for someone who really feels like, I really need disciplines to help me be the best version of myself. And if that's you, Deacon Verner's got him. Just kind of get to him as quickly as you can. I want to sow though. Oh, we got some wholeness in there too? Yeah. I see wholeness. How many wholeness books do we have? 2. Oh, okay. So we have 2 books, and my second book was called Wholeness. Balance is my latest. The one before Balance was Wholeness. Wholeness is for someone who is struggling. You have an inner brokenness, and you're struggling to be whole, to be healthy. You have patterns that you can't seem to break out of. There are blind spots that seem to show up in your life. That's wholeness. I want to sow 2 of those. So just tell Deacon Verner which one you want, Balance or Wholeness, and when we're out, we're out. I believe both of you have books. Is that correct? Okay. Can you just really quickly, just the name of your books and where they can be found?
Expanding Black Masculinity, Psycho-Spiritual Healing. I did have a QR code. I don't think I've sent it, but my website, www.oshangadsdenphd.com. You can pre-order the book. Again, www.oshangadsdenphd.com.
Okay, and we'll try to get that slide up. Okay, we got that. And then, Dr. Amos, you've got some books as well.
Yeah, I wrote, my first book was called Please Don't Let Me Die, and it dealt with a young man that I was dealing with rolling into the emergency room, and he grabbed me and asked me to save his life after he'd been shot. And it deals with health and healing. And then I wrote a book called Valley of the Shadows. And I talk about my journeys with people and illness and disease and how I was able to reconcile how disease affects people. It was on Amazon. I'll have to see. I'll try to make it available. I'm always kind of shy about writing a book, but I wrote this book for people that were facing what seemed like unsurmountable health issues.
The reason why it's important is when someone has a wisdom that touches me, I get everything that they've written, because in a moment like this, and yes, we have all eaten and are full. When someone writes a book, they put much more and their finest thinking and their finest expression from their prayer time into that book. So this is my thing. When someone really moves me with something, I order their stuff. I find out more about it. I get more. I feast. We bring this to you for free. I don't want any barriers of entry as it relates to what God is doing to men.